We do not have the capacity to dictate to everyone in the world how they will organize their society and act in their own self-interest, and we shouldn't have. When you get back to your room, get on the computer and get to the Declaration of Independence again. It talks about the right of self-governance. That doesn't apply just to Americans. Others have the right to govern themselves the way they see fit. We should help where we can, support those who act in our interest, but not have the hubris to presume that we can control all events everywhere in the world.
So Anne-Marie, could you share with us your playbook for restoring U.S. leverage in being the benign sculptor of the international system? What are the things that we should be restoring or taking care of or doing from your perspective?
Well, so let me start by agreeing on 2 points very, very deeply with what Senator Mitchell just said, and actually in part what Marwan just said, which is, one, we are in a world of 194 countries. We cannot be the global policeman. One of the best things the Obama administration has done has been to build up regional institutions, including in the Middle East, looking at the Gulf Cooperation Council or the Organization of the Islamic Conference, insisting that people in the region want it as much as we do. I completely agree with that. And I think I also very much agree that we are still the preeminent military power. We are the second largest economy. The EU is the largest economy, and then us and the Chinese will overtake us, but we're still overall the dominant economic player. And I would add a third point, which is in a world of global networks, we are the most central node. No, there's no one central node, but we are the most central node. So I'm very bullish on the United States, and I would agree with both of those things. The book you mentioned said, it's a book called The Idea That Is America, which comes from a letter written by a colonel in Iraq writing to Senator McCain about torture. And it just argues that ultimately our power flows from our values, that our deepest power flows from the values we stand for liberty, democracy, equality, justice, and I add tolerance, humility, and faith. So, and I include humility, and I believe in it. But here's what I see, and so I just want to come back to why I'm making this case, which is not popular and very, very complicated. We say we stand for universal values, and we say that means that where we can stop a genocide, as we could have stopped in Rwanda, where we can stop the mass murder of other people at an acceptable cost to ourselves, then that is part of what we say we stand for in the world. And it is part of what I grew up believing we stood for in the world. And the reason I raised Rwanda is because Bill Clinton looks back, and if any of you have seen the frontline movies on Rwanda where you have, hundreds of thousands of people being murdered by machete because we couldn't even send in 200 Marines, Bill Clinton says that was the greatest single mistake of his presidency. So we could have done that at acceptable cost to ourselves. And I am telling you that the people who have been in Syria, because let's remember, we've had no foreign journalists allowed in for 3 years, but the very few who have say that it is the worst thing they have ever seen. That's saying a lot for journalists who've covered everything since the fall of the wall. The worst thing they've ever seen. They are saying it looks like World War II. We are talking about a government that is using chemical weapons on its own people and dropping barrel bombs on children. This is an audience that should understand better than probably any audience in the world that question of why didn't we bomb the trains? We didn't bomb the trains in World War II. Why didn't we bomb the trains? We could have, and it might have made a difference. But it was really complicated, and there wasn't any political will. And what I'm suggesting is we are going to look back, and we're going to see what happened in Syria, and we're going to see the larger destabilization of the Middle East, the rise of extremism, and we're going to wonder, why didn't we at least try with air power? Why didn't we at least try to force a political solution at an acceptable cost to us? Because no one is saying we should send in ground troops, and if we did, it would be worse than doing nothing. So all I want to end up with is my vision of what makes this country great in the world is living up to our values, and what that means is taking tough choices. when we have the possibility of saving hundreds of thousands of lives at and trying to force a political solution in the only way we ever have been able to, which is you go to the table when you know if you don't, you face the risk of death. If we do not act, we are going to look back and wonder why we didn't.
Well,
Thank you.
let me make one comment.
Real quickly.
First off, of course, at an acceptable cost is a completely subjective view that you can insert any number in there that you want. How you determine it in advance, I just don't know. But I'll just say this. If that's the case, if we are to intervene militarily in every circumstance in the world where people are being killed in substantial numbers, where we deem it to be a violation of our values, then you prepare yourselves over the next 40 years for American military action in every part of the globe, because it is a reality as certain as the sun setting tonight that given the growth of population across wide swaths of Asia and Africa, these tumultuous, often barbaric and horrendous circumstances will repeat themselves over and over again. And to think that people who commit these kinds of atrocities are deterred because in the past the United States did something about it elsewhere is to give them credit for a lot more logic, humanity, and morality than they actually possess. We got to be very careful about this. The American national interest must be the primary consideration of American leaders.